you choose, my brothers? If there was no day or night, which would you prefer to be right? How long have you hated your white teacher? Who told you you love your black preacher? Do you respect your brother's woman friend? And share with black folks, not a...
Greetings, Africans, and welcome to the UNIA Rock Media. My name is Raymond Duguay, and I'm at your service. I'm the first Assistant President General of the UNIA, and today we have a special broadcast. We have none other than Dr. Arthur Lewis and our dear brother, Dennis Boatwright. Dr. Lewis is from the New York, New Jersey area, and our dear brother, Dennis Boatwright, is from the Motor City, the Detroit area. How I got to know these brethren is, in the UNIA, we're very close with Imhotep, and especially Sister Betty and Dr. James McIntosh. These are personal friends of ours. And several weeks ago, Dr. McIntosh, on his Minefield program, had the two brothers, and they were discussing Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. 3 countries that I am dying to get to. Because of what they're doing, the l'AES, Alliance des États du Sahel. So without further ado, let me welcome these brothers in. Okay.
Must prove to the people a better...
Okay. Starting off with Dr. Lewis. Welcome, Dr. Lewis. How are you doing? There's something with the sound. I can't hear anything. Dr. Lewis.
Yep, his mic is unmuted.
Okay, Dr. Lewis, you have to unmute your mic, please. Thank you, Brother Dennis. I'm sure that'll be recovered instantaneously.
Yeah. Doc, go to the bottom of your computer. There's something that looks like a mic. And push it. At the bottom of your screen.
Almost there. Yeah, I can see that it's muted. The icon.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, the icon has the slash through the mic icon. Okay, we're almost there. But
Yeah, we almost there. I'm not in the rush.
Brother Dennis, I like your screen. Man, every time I see those images, I think of Africa. This reminds me of Dr. Lewis, are you there?
Yes. Yeah. I hit unmute. No, this is the button.
Okay.
If you get unmuted, it can up.
Oh, you just muted yourself. Can you please unmute?
Yeah, I see.
Okay,
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Lewis. How goes it, and how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, and I'm glad that I'm here, able to speak to you and the audience and everyone. So I'm thrilled and I'm happy.
Okay. Before we begin, tell our audience something about you. How does a medical personnel get involved with Africa and Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso? Go right ahead.
Okay. So what I would like to do is my response is I've written down some material of which I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to transmit the information. So I wrote up a small resume of myself, a minute, just so that the individual in the audience will get an understanding of who is this person they're looking at in this short period of time.
Okay.
Okay? And so what I've written, so that I'll try to make it as clear. Good evening. My name is Dr. Arthur Lewis. I'm an African American. The American denotes my citizenship. Africa denotes the origin of my ancestors. My loyalty is to Africa. I am 80 years of age and in good health. I've been a medical physician for the past 51 years. I'm married to an African woman from North Carolina for the past 56 years. We have 5 children and 10 grandchildren. I have traveled to East Africa, West Africa, the Caribbean, and the South Pacific for service. So that hopefully will give you an overview of who I am at this particular time.
Thank you very
And my
much.
interest in the Sahel comes from the fact that I've traveled and I have the spirit in order to do whatever I have to do to help Africa.
Okay. Thank you very much. And our second guest is a young brother from Detroit, brother Dennis Boatwright. Boatwright. Go right ahead, brother Dennis.
Well, first, I would just like to thank you for having us on the show, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about something positive about our people. But my name is Dennis Boatwright, aka Imhotep, and I'm the director at the Center for Pan African Studies, a think tank based here in Detroit, Michigan. And we have as a focus Pan Africanism. So, to answer your question and to piggyback off what the Dr. Arthur
Veggie
Lewis
back.
said,
Veggie back. Some of us are vegan. We don't eat pork.
yeah, veggie back off of what Dr. Lewis had brought out, which was very important, is that as Pan Africanists, it was logical for us to have interest in the Alliance of Sahel States, particularly in the Sahel region, because we are all, followers and direct students of Dr. Joseph Ben Yakanan and and Dr. Clark and people like Walter Rodney. So really what's going on in the Alliance of Sahel State is right up our alley.
Okay, let's get started. July 6th, well, even before then, they had created it, but on July 6th, in the capital of Niger, in Niamey, they got together. They officially got it off the ground, and the leader of Burkina Faso, the young Capitaine Ibrahim Traore, gave, multiple speeches. Even the first day when he got to the airport, and how he embraced the brother, the General Tishiani, and how they walked something like 12 kilometers from the airport into the town. That was so uplifting. But go right ahead. Dr. Lewis, take us. What's going on? Why we're here in North America? Why do we need to know what's going on in the Sahel, and specifically those 3 countries? Go right ahead, sir.
Right. So what I would like to do is to look at Africa. You see, so we're speaking about 3 countries that's in the Sahel. So we have to make sure that our listening audience understands what area of the world we're talking about and why is it relevant. So what I did was I put together a brief discussion. Take me about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to read it because there's certain items that I wanted to mention about the importance of Africa, because the Sahel countries are only a portion of Africa. So when we speak to the audience, somebody might say, well, what is the Sahel? What is the Sahel country? So what I want to do shortly is just put some academic material together so that people will understand the space we are talking about. And so I'm going to read. It'll take me about 2 minutes. So my presentation is primarily centered around giving information so that people will be able to follow what we're talking about and why it is important. So I'm going to read to you Africa, because the Sahel we're talking about is a section of Africa. So we're assuming that most people may not know, have a map to see exactly what part of the world are they talking about. So I'm going to read. Africa is the second largest continent in the globe. It's 12 million square miles. The U.S. can fit into Africa 4 times. Africa is the birthplace of humanity and civilization. It has the largest natural resources in the world. There are 44 independent national states in the continent of Africa. The population of Africa presently is calculated as 1.5 billion people. The birth rate is the highest in the world at 4.5 to 5.5. Africa has 65% of arable farmland in the world. We're going to go to now describe the northern part of Africa, where these three nations that we're going to speak about are located, so our listeners will have an idea what part of the world are we looking at. Okay. The Sahel is in the northern part of Africa. It spans from east coast to the west coast of Africa, the full expanse. That expanse from east coast to the west coast is approximately 3,670 miles in length. The area of the Sahel is 1,200,000 square miles. The population is 165 million people. The Sahara Desert borders the Sahel to the north, and to the south, tropical rainforest borders to the south. It's one of the largest depository of natural resources in the world, and the 8 countries that make up the Sahel, 3 of which you alluded to, from west to east in this strip is Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Sudan, and Eritrea. I just want to, I'll stop here so we have geographical aspect, and then I'll respond to another question at this time.
Okay. Brother Imhotep.
Yes. You know what I want to bring up, what's so significant about what's going on in Sahel region of Africa, particularly the Alliance of Sahel State, is that we are an inflection point as a people. And an inflection point is a rapid succession of events in a short period of time that comes rather infrequently. And what we have is the Alliance of Sahel State is not only an inflection point, but it's also a case study of how we're going to respond to the doors that are opening on the continent. We have we haven't had what's happening in the Alliance of Sahel States. We haven't had really in 800 years. Our memory goes back far when the last time we told Europeans and oppressors to get out our countries, and we really meant it this time, and we have them packing their bags. So this is an inflection point to our people that we haven't had in quite some time. And we're talking about reason why, we're talking about the Alliance of Sahel State in particular is because this is what Dr. Clark talked about. This is what Walter Rodney talked about. This is what Frantz Fanon talked about in The Wretched of Earth. The time that we are in now is what our scholars and people like Thomas Sankara, who given their lives up, they were talking about this time. So it's not just on what Alliance of Sahel State is going to do. It got to do what we're going to do as a people. Because I'm going to tell you this, 5, 6 generations down, they're going to judge us on how well we defended Ibrahim Traore, how well we defended Goti Asimi, how well we defended Abdul Rahmani Chiani. So there's a lot at stake at what's going on in the Alliance of Sahel States. So we as a people, not just us as African Americans, but people, the 1.3 billion Africans on the continent, as well as the 300 million people in the diaspora, we are actually being tested on who we are as a people. So if something happened to the Alliance of Sahel State, if they don't succeed, we can point a finger at ourselves.
So, Brother Dennis, are you saying in a very polite way that we're all one people, that what happens to one of us happens to all of us, and that we have an obligation to defend and protect any one of us, especially those of us who stand up and say enough is enough, and they're going to stand up for our people? Please answer.
Yes, I'm saying exactly like that, brother. And you put it aptly. I don't really have to really say anything, but you put it aptly. That's exactly what is happening, and that's a normal. China came together in Asia and got themselves together. It is natural for Black people to be Pan-Africanists because if you notice, even when Africa was at its best, when you look at all the dynasty from 1 to 26, they were doing well when they were practicing Pan-Africanism. But when they allow other people to come in and try to, control their destiny and rearrange their economy, that's when problems start to happen. But what we have now in the Alliance of Sahel State, we have Africans are actually asserting themselves. But it kind of caught us off guard. It caught us off guard. We're talking about in a span from 2021 to 2024. We went from no African unity to three countries proudly and strongly saying we are one country. We haven't had that. And because
Whoa,
like
whoa,
Dr.
whoa.
John,
Oh, hold on. I got to ask you a question. So what about the African Union? Don't they exist? Aren't there
yes,
54 states? Hold it. Go ahead, share with me. You're saying some things that I need you to spell it out in black and white. Don't we have the African Union? Doesn't it exist? Isn't there 54 so-called states in Africa? And don't they come together? Please answer that.
well, I would love to answer that. That's right. But if okay, this will give you put something in context. Okay, first of all, African people didn't build the African Union, their headquarters, by the way, in Addis Ababa. Secondly, currently,
Hold it, hold it. There are 1.3 billion Africans on the continent. Ethiopia has more than 100 million Africans. You're telling me, forget about the rest of the continent, just in Ethiopia, we couldn't even get an architect. We couldn't even come together to build a headquarters that's for us. I mean, I know the answer, but I'm pulling your leg here.
well,
Help me
you know
out.
what? I would love to answer. Keep pulling my leg because the issue is. I was going to add to this. Did you know that 40% of the annual budget of the AU is being paid for by Germany, of all people? So
I knew it was I didn't know it was Germany itself, but I have an idea of the distribution.
it
So
flows
how
from
can we
year.
really be
Yeah.
free if
Well,
our own government, our own central force, we're not even taking care of it?
Well, we have opposing forces that are happening in Africa. There's reasons why Patrice Lumumba got killed, Amilcar Cabral got killed, uh,
Yeah.
Thomas Sankara got killed. There are countervailing forces in there, and that's why what's happening in the Alliance of Sahel State. Since Ibrahim Traore became the transitional president, he has survived 16 major assassination attempts. So there are countervailing forces. There's not that Africa wants to be under subjugation. The fact of the matter, we have out opposing forces, but this time, and Dr. Lewis, he probably alluded to it, and he even explained to me that the Alliance of Sahel State have 4 layers of security around them to make sure that what happened to Gaddafi won't happen to Ibrahim Traore or Chiani. But the point is that we haven't had Pan-Africanism. Pan-African, Dr. John Henry Clark put it aptly and very succinctly. He said Pan-Africanism or Paris. So what you have now, and when we see Pan-Africanism work, we see that Nigeria, who was ranked among one of the poorest country in the world alongside Honduras, now they got the fastest growing economy in the world according to European standards. We have Burkina Faso under the leadership of Ibrahim Traore that prior to the forceful transfer of power, Burkinabes, only 20% of the Burkinabe population only had access to electricity. Already is up to 40%, and they project once this nuclear power plant is built that's going to provide electricity, it's going to go up to 89%. So we're seeing phenomenal growth just by practicing Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is the cure, and that's why you see success on the continent of Africa. Those other people, those other 50 countries, and I could say, I'm not going to say their name, but they're ECOWAS and all the rest of these people. These are people are working. And ironically, I was just talking to a good friend of mine, and she was mentioning ECOWAS and other countries and the AU, by the way. But those institutions are European controlled, and we can expect for them to do
Bingo.
anything in the positive of African Union. They've been around since 1963 when they used to be the Organization of African Unity, and since that time they haven't done anything
Okay.
notable. And
Okay.
AU is just the same. They just changed the name. That's all.
Okay. Let's bring
Yeah.
in Dr. Lewis. I want to hear about the four levels of defense and security. But before we do that, let me just
Okay.
add this. And I know I want Dr. Lewis to come on, but after that I want someone to present some sort of commentary on France and the colonial pact. You know, as the French speaking, so-called French speaking African countries were getting their so-called independence after Guinea stood up and said, guess what? We'll take slavery, we'll take freedom in poverty instead of slavery and opulence. Well, I'm paraphrasing what Ahmed Sekou Touré said. And they opted, said, see you later, France. So as a result, what France does is, up to now, well, not up to now, but up until, let's say, 2022, there are 14 countries, 14 French-speaking African countries that till today, France still controls. 65% of their treasury, France grabs. And then France charges them another 20% VIG for protection and defense. So 85% of their revenues and budgets is held in Banque de Paris. And those 14 countries, we can go over them quickly. There's Benin, who is being used now to destabilize Burkina Faso. There's Burkina Faso with Ibrahim Traore. There's Central African Republic. There's Cameroon. There's Cote d'Ivoire. There's the Congo Brazzaville, as opposed to Democratic Republic of Congo. There's Gabon. There's Guinea-Bissau, Guinea Equatorial, and then there's Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. 14 French-speaking countries that France gets an average of 36 billion, B as in Burkina Faso, every year. 14 times 36, you're talking over half a trillion dollars, 504 billion every year that France gets to do whatever they want. Then France decides who gets the contracts, who does the bridges. So, when you get a guy like Macron saying, well, the problem with Africa is the childbirth, stop. But my question, and I want that's the second part. My question is, where's the outrage of the rest of the planet? United Nations Security Council. Where's the European Union? Doesn't anybody say, look, France, this is slavery by another name? But where's the outrage? Without Niger, France doesn't get electricity. So I'm going to stop it there. Dr. Lewis, please come on in and talk to me about the levels of security that we Africans have put in place now. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, what I'd like to do is to now look on a more global and more historical component to the status of Africa now and to the Sahel nations in particular.
Go right ahead.
And again, I'm going to read the history because we have to educate. So this is what I'm going to present for your consideration. A global picture. There's a question I want to ask for our consideration. Is the Western European countries and the United States the problem or Africa? That's the question I'm asking as of today. Let's go back on the history so that we can get an understanding of the history of what had transpired on the African continent within the last 200 years to bring us to this position that we are enumerating at this particular point. The countries participated in the Atlantic African slave trade from 1400 to present. You had what we're going back in history to understand Africa now, we're going back 200 years. There was a Berlin and Brussels conference in Europe in 1884, 1885. And the participant in that was Western European countries. What was the agenda? The partition and the colonization of Africa. That's when they decided to go in and partition. Who was at this conference? The Western European nations. Russia attended the conference, but did not take any colonies in Africa. The Chinese did not attend this conference. The US government sent a delegation. The delegation, the three delegates were John Casson, Henry Sanford, Henry Stanley. And what was their interest, the United States' interest in Africa at that point? African access to African resources and markets. The second thing that these three representatives from the United States did, they administered Liberia. The third thing they did was they assisted the German government in their pursuit of the colonization. The third thing the United States representative did was the recognition of the Congo Free State King Leopold in Belgium. I want to remind everybody historically that the United States government fought against African liberation in the 1900s. The UK, which is Britain, gave to the United States as payment for assistance in World War II. It gave the United States access to the natural resources of their colonies, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. So the United States has a history in Africa when it comes to the present status that we now find Africa in, and this is part of the history in that particular case. What I want to also mention is that you just had an African Chinese summit in China discussing the status of African countries. Now, let me give you some of the criteria of Pan-Africanism and why the Sahel is such a standout at this particular point. In the Sahel region, there were 4 coups, one in Guinea, 2020, one in Mali, 2020, one in Burkina Faso, 2021, and a coup in Niger, 2023. We're going to concentrate on the 3 countries that we're considering in the Sahel, which is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The military removed the government with popular backing because those 3 presidents of those 3 countries was not providing security for its population. So there was a coup. In the coup, they took military control. And the first thing that they did that makes the 3 Sahel nations outstanding, the first thing they did was they secured the country and began to provide for the people of the country security, because in each of those 3 countries, there were jihadists who had controlled the northern part of the country. After they secured the coup, what they did was they asked a number of countries to come and assist them militarily to strengthen their military so that they can provide security for the country while they attempted to build the country. After they secured the country, they expanded the international relationship. These 3 countries basically was restricted to doing business with the French. When these three countries came in their independence, they expanded their international connection. They began to work with countries from Europe, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, and a number of African countries. So what they did was they asked non-European countries to assist them to build up their military so that they can protect the people. It came a time when ECOWAS decided that they were going to overthrow, reverse the coup in Niger. So the three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, formed a military pact for common collective security. That was in 2023. And then in 2024, they developed a confederation where they joined the three countries together economically and politically. They exhibited a form of Pan-Africanism, which other countries aren't, because they secured the security of the people. They began to expand their international relationship for the people. They built a military compact and they built a economic compact. Those are the major things that they brought to those three countries that made them stand out as an example of Pan-Africanism, which is you must provide and protect the people. That's what makes them unique. In terms of what they are basically fighting against are those elements that want to reverse that structure. And those elements that want to reverse the structure are the very ones who implemented the colonization of Africa.
Dr. Lewis?
Yes?
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that out.
okay, I've got some questions for you. So it
Yeah.
seems that the same people that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade, the same people involved in the colonization, destruction of Africa, are the same people running the planet now. Same people telling Africa and Africans what to do. So here come these three Africans representing their states, and they're saying enough is enough. So, Dr. Lewis, since the last 200 years, has the relationship between Africa and the Europeans and other non-Africans, has it fundamentally changed? Please answer that.
Okay, you would have to, one starting point is in the end of World War II in 1944. There was the United States of America came out as a dominant country. So United States with France and England developed the United Nations. The United Nations was a tool developed by those three countries to dominate the Africans and Asians politically. They created the UN. After Bretton Woods in the United States was an economic meeting between the United States, England, and France, primarily. And in that discussion, they came out with three things: that the world will use the US dollar as the global currency. They created the World Bank and IMF as a lending institution to dominate the Africans and the Asians. And they used NATO and United States military power to dominate the world. I'm using the word world at this point, militarily. At that time, at the at the Bretton Woods Conference, there were 46 countries. Of those 46 countries, only 4 were African. One was Liberia, which was under the United States. One was Egypt, which was under Britain. One was South Africa, which was under white rule, and Ethiopia was the only African there. The only Asian countries that attended was Russia, at that time Soviet Union, and nationalist China. At that time, most of the African countries, Asian countries, Caribbean, Central, and South American countries were, in effect, colonies of the United States and the Europeans. It was that setup up to this date. Let's take 2020, that the United States and Europeans, quote unquote, ran the world. But now things are changing. Countries are building other institutions to make those changes. You have the evolution of the BRICS, you have the evolution of the African Free Trade Zone, and you now have a number of independent countries which are reversing those three.
Okay. Dr. Lewis, whoa, hold on. Are you saying that, look, listen, I want to paraphrase what you just cited, that those countries wanted to dominate the African and the Asian countries. That's why they created the United Nations. That's what Bretton Woods was about. That's what Bretton Woods, United Nations, IMF, and the World Bank. Oh, I thought,
And
and NATO.
militarily, NATO and the United States.
Right.
They dominated the rest of the world up until about 2020.
Okay.
That dominance is decreasing.
Okay, here's my question. I thought the United Nations was created for the goodness of humanity, so we can all come together and live as one people. You're saying it was always about power and how white folks can continue their domination. Yes or no?
What you do is you go back to the original documentation and you look at who are considered the founding members of the UN. It's the United States, England, France, the nationalist China, which is with the West, and the Soviet Union. That's clear. They are giving credit for creating the UN. At that UN, there were 46 countries who signed as charter members. Those are the same 42 countries that signed at the Bretton Woods. Those 42 countries, you take out the United States, England, France, Soviet Union, and nationalist China, and a few European countries. The signatures that you see there were countries in Africa who signed, they were colonies of the Europeans. Those Caribbean countries who signed that European document and signed as a member of the Bretton Woods, they were Caribbean countries under the European. The Central and South American countries that signed the UN document and signed in the Bretton Woods, they were all under the colonial control of the United States, England, or France. The African countries, the Asian countries, the Caribbean countries, and the other. So it's clear that the United Nations were formed for that purpose. And when you see how the United Nations functions, you see, give you an example of the World Health Organization, part of the UN, one of the 17 subgroups, part of it. Who is the major donors of the World Health Organization and who controls it? The United States, Bill Gates, the Western European pharmaceutical company. That's who dictates policy. As an example of how the UN is used. That's historical. See, we talk and we give our opinions, but we have to go back to see what actually happened. For instance, they said the United States never defaulted on they defaulted in the 30s on the gold. And one of the biggest default was when, after the Bretton Woods in 1970, at the Bretton Woods Conference, the United States currency was considered the world's currency. Everybody had to use that for trade. And the reason they agreed to that was because it was backed by gold. 1971, when the Vietnamese War occurred, the United States started printing more money than they supposed to, backed by the gold. France and other countries asked for to give back the US dollar, and they want gold. United States either did not have the gold or would not do it. So they came off the United States defaulted on the US currency 1971, 72, 73, and only after they instituted the 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 uh, uh, the oil relationship with the petrodollar with the Saudi Arabia, then the world picked up on the dollar.
Okay.
So it's clear when you examine the Bretton Woods and all of the post-world institutions, including the UN, they're all European for domination. UN for political, US and NATO for military, and the IMF and World Bank is to lock them down, and that's why you have it at this point. And what's happening is the non-white world is making attempts, forming organizations like BRICS and others to break that and overturn that at this point.
Got it. Okay. Brother Dennis, Imhotep. You know what's going on. Recently, there was a debate, and a lot of our people are excited over some candidate. It's a black woman who's running for some office of this country. My question to you, will it ever be the case that we, the people, can force this U.S. government to stop, to take its knee, take its boot off the neck of Africa, independent of whom is running this country? We saw a couple years ago there was an African who was running this country, and now there's potentially another African who's running for office. Your answer, with your thoughts, go right ahead.
United States has been fundamentally the same for people of African descent from the time of the so-called Emancipation Proclamation to 2024. And what I'm saying is, regardless from the president from George Washington to Joe Biden, our socioeconomic status has been fundamentally the same. So what that means is that it doesn't matter who is going to be the president because it doesn't impact our people of African descent. In fact, both candidates say loudly as their signature statement is that we're the president of all America, not just black people. So they're making it clear that they're there and they're actually selected to continue the colonial empire of the United States. But as Dr. Clark had said something in one of his books, Africans at the Crossroads, and he posed a profound question in one of his chapters, and that is, can African people save themselves? So for since for 800 years, because we're talking about prior to European slavery, we had Arab enslavement of people of African descent. So Dr. John Henry Clark posed this profound question: can African people save themselves? And since we're talking about the 12th or 13th centuries, Africa has been silent in whether or not they can answer Dr. Clark's question. So what we have is now we have three African countries that have finally answered Dr. Clark's question by saying, yes, we can save ourselves. So if Africa is going to be saved, which is 1.3, 1.4 billion people, it's going to be Africa. It's not going to be around because there comes a lot up because, we over here in America and we feel that we enjoy some of this so-called capitalism and what have you. And we have developed a somewhat of what you call a black exceptional mentality, just like you have what European exceptionalism. Africa has to save itself because it has the resources and it has the people to do it. And we see that what's happening. But what's happening is this. What happened on the continent of Africa? There's usually some parallels. Typically, when something happened terrible on a continent, we see it reverberate throughout the diaspora, whether it's in Haiti, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Brazil, and what have you. And I bring this up to say that Africa, people of African descent, when I'm talking about also in the diaspora, when Africa is healthy, people of African descent in general are going to be healthy as well. That's the way it's going
Bingo.
to go. And Africa is they're on spot on now. They're on the right trail. And, I would like to get off into how we even got here to this inflection point that, I had talked to some officials personally, and they told me that this was their time. They seen a window open. And because what's happening is you have Europe bogged down with the Ukrainian war with Russia. You got whole NATO. They have spent hundreds of billions of dollars and haven't won 1 inch from Russia. And then they're bogged out in the Middle East with the what's happening, the genocide against the Palestinians. They bogged down in there, and then the Houthi is giving them trouble down there, costing them billions of dollars to reroute all of those ships to go around to Africa, and then not to mention the Cold War. So the people up in the Sahel region knew that this was their time to act when their enemies was at their weakest. Because I'm gonna tell you this about an inflection point is that there's a lot of high activity going on within a short period of time, but also there's a test of the people of their resolve. How are they going to respond? Are we just going to quote? Are we just going to do Black History Month and Juneteenth and Kwanzaa, or are we going to do something realistically and help throw our support behind the Sahel region of Sahel state? Because I tell you this, Dr. Clark said that black people of African descent, we are a poster child of missed opportunity. Every time when it seems we're running towards the end zone with that football in our hand, and as soon as we get to this 2 yard line, we fumble the ball because we get caught up in superficial disagreements and arguments. So it's a test, not just for the Sahel region, it's a test for all people of African descent. Are we going to allow this Pan Africanism to flourish, or are we going to be the reason why Alliance of Sahel State is one of a somewhat of a one hit wonder or something? Are we going to let it be that? So now's our time, because if we don't do it now, these inflection points are they come happen very infrequently, and if we don't take advantage of this short window that may only last for another 2 to 5 years, we're going to have to wait another 100 years to get this opportunity to assert ourselves and come be independent people. So I just want to make that clear of where they're at. It's not on what the Alliance of Sahel State. They represent us. We are just one unit, and if they're failed, we're going to fail too. And I hate to see when I say fail, I say this in a way that we're going to be talking about this. We're going to be reading books. We're going to be talking about. We're going to still be caught up on talking about the best examples we got is the dynastic Egypt, for example, which are good examples. But we need some today type examples, and we got it right now. We got a real live Thomas Sankara. We got a real live Marcus Garvey, pretty much running Mali and Niger. So it's time for us to show up. It's
Okay.
time to show what we've been studying for. What have we been studying for? To
Okay.
talk about this stuff or be participants?
Okay. As we're getting
What
ready to wrap up, let me
can,
say a couple of things. Hold
yeah,
on.
can I yeah,
Oh, go
can
ahead,
I
Dr.
just make
Lewis.
a quick comment?
Go right ahead.
Let's look at Africa in terms of its trading. Africa's largest trading partner is Europe. Africa's second largest trading partner as of this time is China. What is it that Africa, what is it that Europe and China gets from Africa? Without these products, if you cut off, the Africans cut off and not trade with Europe and not trade with China, to show you how important Africa has always been, is, and why you have this problem with farm people trying to get your natural resources and don't want to pay for them. Gas, oil, wood, coal, food, fertilizer, minerals, and uranium. Those are the 8 major items that Africa supplies Europe and China. Cut it off, and China would not be able to function as a major industrial country without these products. That's how important Africa is to the globe, and that is why you have the foreigners in the U.S. and others in there trying to get the natural resources. Now, let's look at Africa for 1 or 2 more minutes, and let's get a snap view. You ask yourself the question: who has military bases in Africa? How many bases the U.S. military have in Africa? Liberia, Libya, Chad, Nigeria, and Burkina Faso. They got rid of the French and U.S. bases. The United States has bases in Senegal, Ghana, Gabon, Cameroon, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti. Why all of these military and lab bases in Africa? The natural resources. That is what is the major factor in all of this. And I'm going to just end and round up the future of Africa. Let's take China. Now, China, after the Civil War, 1945, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic is the first country that recognized Big China. I call them Big China. From 1947 to 1970, Russia, Soviet Union was the critical nation that sustained and built and helped Big China. From 1947 to 1970, Russia built factories, they built the infrastructure and other structures there. So without the Soviet Union assisting China, it put China on a footing that now allowed them to begin to industrialize with the technology that was brought to China by the United States and Europe, sending all of the technology there. So they got the technology in a very short period of time. And they got the major economic boost to build their infrastructure. Soviet Union built it from 1945 to 1970. So China didn't just jump up with all of its genius, not to take anything away from them, but without that 47 to 70, Russia pretty much built the infrastructure, railroads and everything, assist them with loans and everything. Then they got the technology from the Europeans and the United States after they outsourced all of the industry. And the reason that China then was able to be in the position to do the trade with Africa, and this trade with Africa makes it possible for China to become a great industrial power. So without African resources, without Soviet Unions building the infrastructure, you probably would not have a China as you see it. When you look at the fact that Africa has 1.5 billion, if the population continues, they say 1/3 of the world's population will live in Africa. Africa is going to industrialize, and Africa is going to build up, and in 10, 15, or 20 years, what you see in China, you're going to see in Africa. Africa will, in 20 years, be the industrial center of the world. It's not a matter of hope. It's the procession that you see. It has everything that it needs going that way.
Well said. Okay. My dear brothers, we're getting ready to close. Before we close, I just have to inform you, when I introduce myself, I'm the first Assistant President General of the UNIA. In the UNIA, we have a motto. It's one God. And when we say one God, we're talking about a black God. One aim, and that aim is the redemption of Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. And we have one destiny, and that destiny can only be the federal United States of Africa. You know, Mr. Garvey didn't take us to Africa. He brought Africa to us. He gave us a spine. He let us believe that a better day can come. He organized, he planned. Mr. Garvey had 12 million members from 38 states of the United States of America and 41 countries on the planet. And his absolute adherence and belief in productivity. No one respects a beggar. No one respects people who are always begging for jobs. Give me a job, master. Give me a job. No, go out and do it yourself. So within the philosophy of Mr. Garvey is racial uplift, but there's a necessary corollary, self-reliance. You got to do it yourself. So as we close out, I'd like the last statement. First of all, I thank both of you. It was a pleasure listening to you on Dr. McIntosh's program, and it's been an even more pleasure listening to and meeting you. Well, not physically, but at least I've gotten to know you, and we've bonded. So I thank you, and this is the first time, but certainly not the last time you'll be on the podcast. So to close out, let's start with Brother Dennis Imhotep. Last statement, And then, oh, before you make your last statement, if any one of us wants to travel to one of those three states, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, how do we go about doing that? Because I know, being that those three countries have stood up and they're going to face the wrath of the white world, and you know they're going to destabilize. And Brother Dennis mentioned 16 times that Ibrahim Traore's life has been in jeopardy. So how can we? I mean, are they just opening up and say, "Come on in, brothers," or do they have to have utmost security, airtight security? And how can we visit? How can we go and see these places? Brother Dennis, please answer that.
A great question. That's why, me and Dr. Lewis, we have been talking to certain officials, and we have established on our way of establishing where we're bringing people to the Sahel region so that they can see some of the good things. Because, quite frankly, even some of the educated people of African descent over here, the intellectuals, they are totally unaware of the positive progress that's happening in Alliance of Sahel States. So, what we did with we talked with Mali, Burkina Faso, and we actually met these people, and we have set up something where we're going to start taking groups of people to visit Burkina Faso, Timbuktu, and Mali, as well as Niger, so they can see some of the wonderful things. So, in the interim, you can contact the Center for Pan African Studies at 313-397-8159, and we can set that process. Get that process going. But what I wanted to say, you mentioned Marcus Garvey, and I'm a big fan of Marcus Garvey. In fact, this is why I love black people so much because of Marcus Garvey as well as John Henry Clark. But Dr. We had all thought that Ethiopia was going to be the representative of Africa. And in fact, because of the Bible, which Marcus Garvey used to quote a lot, Egypt shall stretch forth his hands, meaning that it will be welcoming all the descendants of people of African descent. But in fact, it's not Egypt that I'm not Ethiopia that is stretched forth in his hand. Is Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali are stretched forth in their hands to us. So we have to do our brother, we have to do what we can to see this model of Pan Africanism. Because I'll tell you this, and I'm gonna close with this: if Marcus Garvey were alive, he will be supporting the Alliance of Sahel State. Not if he probably would have lived there, because Alliance of Sahel State has finally created a base for Pan Africanism that we can talk about some of the things that we're talking about now freely without fear of being molested or being in prison. They have created a base for Pan Africanism finally. So I know with Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, they would be in Burkina Faso right now. So I just thank you for giving me this platform. Next time, I will come with a little more preparation and different things like that. But this is our time, and we can't allow this to be another missed opportunity. Because if we do, all those books that we're reading, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Carter G, well, it's not going to mean anything, because we got a time where the Creator is challenging us to show the world who we are, and He gave us a base. He not just one country; He gave us three countries that we can start and hope and support it, and hopefully they expand and become a model for the rest of the Africa. It's now or never. And I hate to say it, if we don't take advantage of this inflection point, uh, we're gonna have to wait another 80 or 100 years to get this opportunity again.
Well, just think about it.
Okay.
Thomas
Can,
Sankara was assassinated in 1987. So you're talking from 87 basically to 2024. So we can't wait. Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. Lewis.
yeah. Let me give you a little information about the security situation. And this is only from what I'm reading and what I'm hearing, so I don't have any inside information. The three countries made a military pact. When they made the three coups, ECOWAS decided to put together a military force to overthrow Niger. It was at that time that the three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, signed a military pact. Attack on one is attack on the three. A year later, they made a federation, the economic and political part. What backed up, what prevented ECOWAS from invading Niger was the unity of those three countries together. Number one. The second thing that helped was Algeria, the third largest military in Africa, said they would not allow any country or countries to invade or disrupt Niger because they saw what the United States and NATO did to Libya
Gaddafi.
and how that disrupted the whole area. And all the countries know that these jihadists were put there and maintained by the United States West and the rest of them. That's there. They got there after Gaddafi was overthrown in 2012. They were put there. The same jihadists that were used by the West against Syria and against Russia on a number of occasions. So Algeria said they would protect Burkina Faso, Niger. The northern part of Nigeria are the same people as those Sahel people in Niger because the Spanish and the French English just cut it.
No, but it will,
The
but
northern
Dr. Lewis, we're one people. Doesn't matter. We're
yeah,
one
but
people
I
anyway.
want to give you the specifics of how that Pan African stopped any military because of the unity. The people of the northern state of Nigeria and the military component of Nigeria is the northern state, and the senators from the Senate told Tinubu, in no way we going to invade Niger, and they're our cousins and brothers. That stopped it. Then we learned that a number of countries headed by Nigeria were trying to cut off the three Sahel nations. So what happened is Algeria. Now, what countries are recognized the three Sahel nations and have committed military forces and alliances to come to the aid of any of the three countries? These are the countries: Tunisia, Algeria, eastern part of Libya, Egypt, uh, 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 Cuba, Nicaragua, Russia, China, Iran. They're going to come. You're going to have to fight the world. Bring you to one understanding. What the Russians and the Chinese have said, that they will no longer allow, they said, any country attacked by the United States or the West, Russia and China will come to the aid of that country. They have stopped that. So you have at least 10 countries which have pledged military support for the protection of the Sahel. That's number one. The other thing is on the Burkina Faso, with the help of these countries and other African countries, they have built up their army. They have helicopters, they have jet fighters, they have the modern, they have satellites. They're putting together a large, strong army. They're putting together 50,000 National Guard and militia. So they know how to protect themselves. And we're just getting, and I'll end here recently, Nigeria just came to Niger and says, I'm going to work with you against the jihadists. Togo came to Niger and says, I'm going to work with you. Even Ghana last week, is now going to join with those three Sahel nations. So Ghana, Togo, and Nigeria all said that they are going to work in a collective way to now secure Africa. Ain't going to be no overthrows.
There you have it. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, Brother Imhotep Dennis Boatwright. Once again, thank you, Africans, for listening to the UNIA Rock Media podcast. It's been my pleasure. And one more time, Brother Dennis, what is the phone number of the Pan African Institute if anybody wants to reach you?
You could go to 313-397-8159, and I would add the email address director at the Center for Pan African Studies.org. Also, we have a website with all of these things that me and Dr. Lewis have been discussing here. You can go to www.the Center for Pan African Studies.org. www.centerforpanafricanstudies.org. And I just thank you for having us on here.
Okay, so my dear beautiful Africans, as we close out, I ask you to recite after me. Africa,
Africa.
Africa.
for the Africans,
For the African.
For the Africa.
those at home,
Those at home.
Those at home.
and those abroad.
And those abroad.
One God,
One God.
One God.
one aim,
One
aim.
and one destiny.
and one destiny.
One destiny.
Long live Africa, long live the UNIA, long live the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I say to you, go in peace and race first. Thank you, brothers. Have a good night.
Thank you for
Okay.
having us. Appreciate it.
Okay, there you have it. Another episode of the UNIA Rock Media. I thank you for listening to us. At this point, we're going to close out with a beautiful song that you will get to know. I've got to go back home.
How do you close out?
Yeah. Doc, I can still see you. Can you see us, Doc?
Okay. Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
This is just the beginning. We be winning.
Yes, sir. Comme ça. Yes, sir. Marcher là. Marcher.